The Milwaukee Bucks are fighting for their lives, desperately scratching and clawing their ways out of the grave they dug for themselves. I've watched every Bucks game this season, and I can assuredly say this has been an emotional roller coaster for the ages. They look bad. There's no fancy way to phrase it. Top to bottom, this looked like a poorly constructed basketball team. To begin the season, they had a worse record than the Detroit Pistons and the Washington Wizards. A team which had championship aspirations unwillingly became the frontrunner of the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, which wouldn't even be a consolation prize since Milwaukee doesn't own their first round pick this season. But tanking was never in consideration since this team had the highest of expectations. In 2023, the Bucks fired championship-winning head coach Mike Budenholzer and hired Adrian Griffin, who was an assistant coach with the Toronto Raptors. Things appeared positive for the Bucks by the midway point of last season as they held the second best record in the East with 30 wins to 13 losses. Sure, they had their ups and downs, especially defensively, but they were on pace for a near 60-win season, which would have tied the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Denver Nuggets as the second best record in the NBA. Apparently, the front office wasn't satisfied with the 70% winning percentage, and the scope was aimed at Adrian Griffin. Griffin was never embraced by the locker room. His relationship with the franchise man Giannis Antetokounmpo withered quickly. Terry Stotts, who once manned the helm now controlled by Griffin, was brought on as an assistant. Both men would clash, and that ultimately led to Scott's departure right before the season opener. Terry Stotts was Damian Lillard's head coach up in Portland for over a decade, so that could have caused a rift between Adrian Griffin and his newly acquired star. In regards to Griffin's relationship with Giannis, the Greek Freak was not a fan of the Bucks' defensive strategy, as they were a bottom-level team on that end, despite having a starting lineup of Brook Lopez, who'd finished second in DPOI voting the previous season, and Antetokounmpo himself, who was a former Defensive Player of the Year. This combined maelstrom was enough to put Griffin behind the 8-ball. The team swiftly axed him despite his win total. More than likely, it's because he fell out of favor with Lillard early on because of the Terry Stotts situation, and not getting acquainted with Giannis Antetokounmpo with the franchise's face was a death sentence. And so came the shocking announcement that in the middle of the season, the Bucks would move forward with Griffin's termination and would instate in his place Doc Rivers. The last time Doc Rivers coached a basketball team, they sold a 3-2 lead in the second round of the playoffs. And if there's one thing you can take away from this video, it's that no lead is safe if your head coach is Doc Rivers, and I am not referring to the opponent's lead. His all-time record after his team has secured 3 wins in a series is 16-33. To put this absurd record into perspective, Erik Spoelstra, the current head coach of the Miami Heat, has coached 600 fewer playoff games than Rivers, yet is 5 wins ahead of him in that department. Doc Rivers' road to infamy began in Orlando. By his third year in 2003, with a roster unimpressively assembled consisting of has-beens and a 23-year-old Tracy McGrady as the team's linchpin, the Magic squeezed into the playoffs as the 8th seed. They'd face the Detroit Pistons, who'd go on to win the NBA championship the next year. With an incredible margin to overcome against a formidable opponent, the Magic captured some of their namesake, taking a 3-1 lead versus the Pistons in that first round matchup. The Magic rode McGrady's shoulders as he averaged an astonishing 35 points per game on 51% shooting from the field across the first 4 games, with back-to-back 40-point performances in games 1 and 2. But this gritty Pistons unit, who defined the 2000s with their tough, molasses-paced brand of basketball, adjusted to Orlando's game plan and played the remaining 3 games with a strategy focused on attrition. Fueled by Orlando's young star's arrogant comment The future champs made McGrady eat his words. It released the hounds on him and managed to take him out the series completely. Tracy McGrady limped to the finish line in the final 3 games, dropping to 25.5 points per game on 45% shooting. The Magic made 0 adjustments, a very common concern with Doc Rivers-led playoff teams, as we'll come to discover. Rivers assumed another act of McGrady's heroics would be enough to push them through, but Detroit's defensive mandate shut down the Magic offense as they failed to reach 100 points in the next 3 games each. The man was completely outclassed by Rick Carlisle, and this failure would be the most notable moment of Rivers' time with the Magic. Now, Doc Rivers' run with the Boston Celtics during the late 2000s is the reason he always has a job despite his incompetence. Commanding a roster featuring potentially 4 Hall of Famers, the 2008 Boston Celtics added banner number 17 following a 22-year drought to the historic regale of the city of Boston. The Celtics' crowning achievement would ironically become the undoing of multiple other franchises. Rivers' career has been carried by this lone championship ring back in 2008, and since then he's left a trail of destruction team by team. After Boston, Rivers landed in LA with the Clippers, which is where the perspective surrounding his coaching ability began to change. Doc Rivers and the Lob City Clippers deserve their own video. This team spent the better part of a decade chasing a championship and managed to never reach the conference finals despite having prime Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, JJ Redick, etc. And they definitely came close on multiple occasions. They came damn close. In the 2014-15 season, the Clips finished with the 3rd best record in the Western Conference at 56 wins to 26 losses. The Houston Rockets were the 2nd seed with a matching record. When both teams handled business in the first round, it set the stage for an epic clash between the 2 best teams in the West, not named the Golden State Warriors. And since the difference in talent between both teams was razor thin, most anticipated this series would go the distance. And we were treated to a 7-game slugfest, which in retrospect was hands down the best playoff series that year. This was a historic series for one person in particular. Not James Harden, not Chris Paul, or Blake Griffin, or any of the players. After Game 4, the LA Clippers took a commanding 3-1 lead at home. With 3 games to clinch the series, this closing win would guarantee a trip to the next round, which would be the first conference finals appearance for the Los Angeles Clippers. But this is Doc Rivers we're talking about, and he's never on the right side of history. The next 3 games mirrored the series against the Pistons. Nearly 12 years later to the date, another Doc Rivers coach team would squander a 3-1 lead. Following a devastating Game 7 loss, Rivers became the first coach in NBA history to blow multiple 3-1 leads. The next 3 years saw the dissolution of the Lob City Clippers due to unfortunate injuries and malignant disdain internally after numerous postseason failures. By 2020, the curtains were closing on Doc Rivers' tenure as the Clippers head coach. With the newly established core featuring NBA champion Kawhi Leonard and MVP candidate Paul George, the Clippers were looking for a reason to part with the Marquette alum. And with the chance yet again to reach the Western Conference Finals, Doc Rivers performed the unthinkable by squandering his 3rd 3-1 lead, breaking his own record of most 3-1 leads blown by a single person. To put into perspective how rare of a feat this is, there's only been 13 instances in which a team has sold a 3-1 lead. That means Doc Rivers' 3 blown leads makes up approximately 23% of every 3-1 comeback in NBA history. Around 1 out of 4 3-1 comebacks is because of Doc Rivers' shitty coaching. After the Clippers tossed him, he spent 3 years with the 76ers, which was a short but memorable time as he presided over Philly team which had finally completed the process. Rivers was right in the middle of the Ben Simmons fiasco, and all that tension between Rivers and Simmons boiled over after the Sixers lost 2 straight to the infant Atlanta Hawks back in 2021. Game 7 became infamous as the Simmons pass out of an open dunk game. And I mean, what a shocker. Doc Rivers coached the team to yet another Game 7 loss. And he wasn't done either. This is Doc Rivers we're talking about. Maybe he was tired of disastrously blowing 3-1 leads, so he suppressed his appetite and settled for 3-2 leads. Because this dude did it again in 2023. In Game 6 to the Eastern Conference semifinals, 1 win away from an incredibly favorable conference finals matchup against the Miami Heat, the 76ers let Jason Tatum revive his legacy in real time after the worst 3 quarters of his career. And that was all she wrote. Game 7 in Boston was a slaughter, and the loss sent Rivers straight to the woodshed. But even after countless failures, this guy manages to coach another championship contender. The Bucks have a steep uphill climb in order to return to contention. But if there's one man who's well acquainted with large, insurmountable deficits, it's Doc Rivers. Maybe he's overdue for a twist of fate. Thanks for watching.